Good day, everyone. So, welcome to our podcast, and we are the Kinaiya team, and we are going to discuss prejudice, discrimination, and aggression. So, here are my teams. Okay, so we're diving into something that affect all of us. So, prejudice, discrimination, and aggression. These aren't just theoretical concepts; they shape our day-to-day lives, from school to work, and even in our personal relationships.
Exactly. It might sound academic, but they're real. So they affect how people are treated, what opportunities they get, and how they interact with the society. So we often overlook the depth of these issues.
So the first one is prejudice. It is a preconceived opinion that's not based on reason or actual experience. It's an attitude or belief, often negative about someone or something.
Right? And prejudice isn't always about hating someone. It's about making assumption based on superficial traits, like assuming someone is lazy because of their background or judging someone's intelligence based on their accent.
And when you start acting on those beliefs, that's when it turns into discrimination. So it is when someone is treated unfairly because of those prejudices. So in school, if a teacher only calls on boys for math problems because they believe boys are better at it, that's discrimination.
Then, if those actions escalate, if people start becoming hostile towards those they prejudge, that's aggression. And that can be verbal, physical, or even emotional. So, going to the modern day trends, how these issues persist today. First is the Black Lives Matter. Even in today's world, we still see these patterns. For example, let's talk about the hashtag Black Lives Matter movement. It's a response to police brutality and systemic racism, especially against African Americans in the United States. The movement began in 2013 and it grew after the deaths of several black individuals at the hands of the police officers.
And it's also a form of aggression when you think about the violent outcomes in some of these situations. So, protesters being met with force, police brutality, and the emotional toll it takes on communities, all of that is the result of long standing prejudice and discrimination.
And this doesn't just apply to race. It applies to gender, sexual orientation, religion, and even nationality. We see this with the treatment of refugees or immigrants. In some countries, people are treated with suspicion or hostility simply because they come from a different country or culture. So next is cyberbullying. So in today's world, there are more modern trends where prejudice and discrimination are still thriving. Let's start with online hate speech and cyberbullying.
Yes, so the internet is a double edged sword. So while it connects us, it also enables a space for prejudice to fester. So online platforms, especially social media, are rife with hate speech. So people attack others based on their race, religion, gender identity, or sexual orientation, often with no consequences.
Right. It's easy to hide behind a screen and say things you wouldn't normally say in person. This anonymity allows people to express hate in ways that can lead to real life aggression. This online behavior is just as harmful as physical bullying.
Moving on to transphobia and homophobia. It is another trend that we need to talk about, which is gender and sexual identity bias. In recent years, we've seen both a push for acceptance for LGBTQ plus rights, but also a backlash. In many parts of the world, there's been a rise in transphobia and homophobia, particularly when it comes to transgender rights and gender nonconformity.
Just last year, there is multiple protests against laws that allow transgender athletes to compete in sports. The opposition to these laws often comes from a place of prejudice, thinking that trans athletes have an unfair advantage, even when there's no evidence to support that.
And then there's the rise in hate crimes against transgender people, particularly trans women of color. These acts of violence are a direct result of prejudice, and sadly, aggression against the LGBTQ community often comes from a lack of understanding and deep rooted societal norms. Prejudice, discrimination, and aggression in the school environment. So let's bring this to our everyday life. While in school, prejudice and discrimination can happen in very subtle way. For example, which is a gender bias in school. Many schools still reinforce gender stereotypes like assuming boys are better than at math and girls are better at communicating and writing.
And there's also the issue of bullying. Where students being bullied for not fitting in with the norm, in some schools, LGBTQ plus students are often ostracized or even physically attacked just for being themselves.
LGBTQ plus youth face higher rates of violence, discrimination, and even suicide. The aggression they face often stems from deeply rooted prejudice about their sexual orientation or even their gender identity.
So next is, why do we have these issues? So psychologically, our brain are wired to categorize things. It's a survival mechanism. We look for patterns and group people based on similarities and differences. This helps us navigate the world, but when we apply to people, it leads to stereotyping and bias.
And socially, we're influenced by our families, communities, and the media. If you grow up in a community where certain groups are marginalized and stigmatized, you're likely to inherit those views even without questioning them.
Culturally, we live in societies where certain norms and traditions are upheld. And when someone goes against the grain, whether it's because of their gender, race, or background, they're seen as different or wrong. This difference breeds prejudice, which eventually leads to discrimination.
So, how can we mitigate prejudice, discrimination, and aggression? So, first, we need to educate. In schools, we need to include diverse perspective, teach kids about different cultures, histories, and worldviews. The more they understand, the less they'll be prejudiced.
We also need to challenge our own biases. It's important for all of us to recognize our own prejudices and make a conscious effort to unlearn them.
Another important thing is to speak out. If you witness discrimination or aggression, speak up, whether it's in the classroom, at work, or in public. Silence can be just as harmful as the action itself.
And lastly, we need to build empathy. Get to know people who are different from you. Learn their stories. When we humanize others, it's harder to see them as other or less than.
And so, before we end our topic, we're going to give our very, very short conclusion. So, prejudice, discrimination, and aggression don't just affect individuals. They are at fabric of our communities, but we have the power to change that, right?
That's right. So, it all starts with awareness, education, and willingness to change. Let's not just accept the world as it is, let's work together to make it better.
Let's break the cycle. One action, one conversation, one decision at a time. And that's all. Thank you.